The violence shows no signs of letting up in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This comes as President Biden is backing a ceasefire. He voiced that support in a phone call with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu Monday. More than 200 Palestinians have been killed in the fighting, and at least 12 people have been killed in Israel. For more on this, I want to bring in Jane Harman. She's the former Democratic Congresswoman of California's 36th Congressional District and served as a ranking member on the House Intelligence Committee. She's also the author of the new book, Insanity Defense: Why Our Failure to Confront Hard National Security Problems Makes Us Less Safe. Congresswoman, welcome to Red and Blue. What do you think of the Biden administration's response to the escalating violence in the Middle East, and what would you like to see done?
I think they're doing well, given the confusion in the region. You have to understand that, and President Biden does, that these conflicts go back decades. And at this point, both sides have agendas in addition to continuing violence. Those agendas are to advance themselves politically. And this is one of those hard problems that I describe in the book. And doing the same thing, expecting that if the United States says, gee, we want peace, there's going to be peace if the people on the ground don't want it, is part of my definition of insanity. So I think Biden is trying to find the right words. He's dealing with a very complicated situation on Capitol Hill, where Democrats want to criticize Israel and Republicans don't, but they want to criticize Biden because many of them supported Trump. And I think he's doing as well as possible while keeping his eye on other domestic and world problems. The pandemic still has to be solved. We still have to do something about repairing broken infrastructure in this country. Cybersecurity is a huge problem. China's a threat. Russia is meddlesome. And so this is one of many hard problems that he's dealing with.
I'm curious, Congresswoman, how do you think previous administrations' vocal support for Prime Minister Netanyahu is impacting the Biden administration?
Well, Bibi Netanyahu is the leader of Israel. And I think every administration since Harry Truman was one of the first presidents in the world to recognize Israel as a democratic country, independent, democratic, supposedly pluralist country in 1948, every president has supported the leadership of Israel. And so that doesn't surprise me. I think what does surprise me a bit is that in the last administration, the Trump administration, President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu had a close relationship. That's okay. But basically, only the Republican Party was invited to events. I mean, there was the first time that the strong bipartisan coalition supporting Israel kind of was partly ignored and then also split. The Democratic Party is split about the conduct of the government of Israel, and that makes President Biden's task harder. He's known Bibi Netanyahu for decades. They have historically had a close relationship. This is a harder thing to navigate, but I predict that President Biden, who is friendly and has deep experience in foreign policy and deep experience in the United States Senate, and I'm sure has been to Israel dozens of times, will do his best.
I also want to ask you about Afghanistan. The House held a hearing this morning on the U.S.'s relationship with Afghanistan following the military withdrawal. As someone who served on the Intelligence Committee through a significant part of the war in Afghanistan, was removing U.S. forces the right call in your view?
Well, they're not fully removed. And this is a perfect metaphor for the book I've just written when I say, how our failure to solve hard problems makes us less safe. We did the right thing in Afghanistan after 9/11. What we did was Congress voted, this hasn't really happened since, on an authorization to use military force. Actually, we passed one other one on Iraq, which turned out to be a disaster. But in Afghanistan, every member of Congress except one person voted to authorize the use of force to degrade and decapitate those who attacked us on 9/11. And we accomplished that mission extremely well. What was the problem? We stayed. And we stayed with a military mission. And that mission got bigger and bigger and bigger. We spent trillions of dollars and we lost many American and obviously Afghan and other lives. Afghanistan has been an international mission with an international force there. And at this point, I think President Biden is doing the right thing, which President Trump also tried to do. Trump wanted to end the military mission on May 1st. And I don't think he had an adequate plan for leaving. I think Biden's is better. But we're not leaving the country alone. We're ending the military mission. We're still going to have diplomacy, do training, provide aid, and hopefully, with a group of nations, help broker a more permanent peace there.
So let me ask you more about your book. It is called Insanity Defense: Why Our Failure to Confront Hard National Security Problems Makes Us Less Safe. What do you think, Congresswoman, is the most pressing national security issue that the United States has failed to or is failing to address?
Well, the book starts with the end of the Cold War. And I was elected to the first post-Cold War class in Congress. I served in Congress for 9 terms. And I remember very well on one of my first days on the House Armed Services Committee, I represented an aerospace district in Los Angeles. The chairman of the committee, a man named Ron Dellums, who had been a decorated Marine and also represented Berkeley, California, a very liberal district. So he kind of spanned a lot of stuff, asked the question, or said, rather, we don't have a plan for the post-Cold War world. We're going to need a plan. And he was right. We didn't have a plan. We assumed because we won the Cold War and Russia lost the Cold War. And that sense of grievance about being treated badly as a loser has fueled a lot of what Russia has done in recent years. But at any rate, we didn't have a plan, and we missed the rise of China in the 90s. We thought China wanted to be like us. Well, China didn't want to be like us. We also missed the rise of terrorism in the 90s. And then came 9/11, and now comes the fact that China has risen. And it has a very different concept of the role of government, and it is carrying out policies that many in the United States disagree with. And we have trade issues, and it's building a robust military, and it has, so on and so forth. So if you're asking me probably those are the 2 biggest things we missed: the rise of China and the rise of terrorism.
Well, we certainly heard President Biden talk about China being a main focus of his agenda moving forward. Former Congresswoman Jane Harman, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you very much.